All right, thanks everyone for being here. I'll get started in just a couple seconds. So I wanted to do a video. Normally I don't live stream on Sundays, but I've been kind of busy this weekend, didn't put out much, so I figured I'd try to do a longer live stream today. This is all going to be about the Iran situation. So I just want to say from the outset that I think this is a very difficult situation, and there's a lot of ins and outs of it. Reminds me of that scene in The Big Lebowski. A lot of ins and outs. You got to feed the monkey, man. So it's going to be really a nuanced discussion. I don't think this is a discussion where it's a really simplistic thing. It's like, yeah, we should always trust Trump, or yeah, U.S. aggression's always bad. I don't think it's as simple as that. So I'll probably say something in this, no matter what your take on it is, that you disagree with me and you're upset with me, and that's fine. I think reasonable people could disagree. So the other thing I want to say is this is not going to be something that I'm going to get into the weeds and like very specific natures of who Soleimani was, exactly the crimes he's committed, the 2-year lead up to what's going on here. It's not going to be that. One, because I don't think that's really what my audience, the people that I'm normally listening to, I don't want to try to get into that with them. But so the second thing is that I'm just trying to give, I haven't done that research enough that I'm comfortable with it. I've done some research, but I was busy this weekend and I didn't really get into it. But I think it's irrelevant to the discussion I'm going to be having. This discussion is more of just to give my general first impressions of what's going on here. The last thing I'll say is, even if you disagree with me, I hope that you can trust that, look, I know what I should say, just like when I ran for Congress. I knew who my audience was, and I knew exactly what I should say. So it would behoove me, seeing as how I'm a big Trump supporter, most of my followers are Trump supporters, to just come on and say, yep, everything Trump does is totally perfect. That's not really what my take on this is going to be. And so I hope that even if you disagree with me, you trust that at least I'm being honest and giving my honest opinions on things. So we only have one person watching right now, but that's fine. It's Sunday. I don't know how many people will tune in. But I wanted to get this out there because even though it's a difficult video to do, I'm not trying to hide from any positions or any stories. So I wanted to give my honest opinions on it. So let's start with what we know. The facts that I think everybody can agree with. There's two facts that I think that are relevant leading into this. The first that I think almost everyone, unless you're a complete American-hating nut, can agree to is that both Iran and, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Soleimani, are very bad. They murder innocent people. They're, regardless if you want to call them terrorist sponsors or what, they're bad people. They are. Now, that on its own doesn't justify an attack because, as I'll get to later, there's all sorts of bad people, such as in Saudi Arabia, other places around the world that we deal with constantly, and we're not killing leaders of those countries. So that doesn't prove that we should attack them or anything like that. But it is a fact, and I think we all know that. So it's worth mentioning it. The other thing that's worth mentioning is we know that the U.S. Embassy was attacked. In fact, about 3 days before the embassy was attacked, there was an attack on an Iraqi site where we had several soldiers, U.S. soldiers injured, and a contractor from the United States killed. That led to the United States then striking several targets, killing about 25 people that they said was responsible. They blamed Iran, and then that led to the attack on our embassy. We know for a fact that I haven't seen anyone dispute this, that the PMF, which, let me see, get what exactly that means. It's the, I forget exactly what PMF stands for, but it's this group that works within Iraq and other places that's basically supported by the Iranian government. We know that they were largely the ones that were attacking the embassy. In other words, militant groups that are backed by the Iranian government did attack the U.S. Embassy. That's beyond dispute. So I think it's important that we start with the facts. Now, let me say here that one of the frustrating things is because my big take on this is going to be this. I might as well just come out with it. We can have a reasonable discussion on whether or not what Trump did was good, the response was good. Hey, what's up, Modus? We could talk about what the escalations might be, what's going to come in the future. But my big take on this is this. Because we do not have a media that we could trust, and we don't have an intel agency that we could trust, it's left to people like me and you to try to make up our minds, knowing that basically everyone talking about this that has any sort of authority in the public narrative is full of it. So then it's left to us to sift through and try to see through all the BS to come up with an opinion ourselves. And that's very difficult. That's how reasonable people that are just everyday average Americans that are going to work 9 to 5, they can come to different conclusions whether they think it was a good thing Trump did this or not. I don't blame these individual people on the ground. You could be a reasonable person, and I have these two conflicting beliefs in myself. I'm tired of the foreign regime change wars. I'm tired of it. That's one of the reasons I voted for Trump. He was like, why are we fighting Assad and Russia and Syria? I'm all for getting rid of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, things like that. But like Obama's actions in Libya, Obama's actions primarily in Yemen, his actions in Syria, the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, it's not that I'm a pacifist that thinks we should never have conflict. To the contrary, I think that when we or our people are attacked, we should respond back. We should do so swiftly and strongly. But oftentimes it seems like we're getting lied into situations because it benefits elite people in this country, the establishment. You've heard me say often, the only time you could turn on the news and see MSNBC or see the New York Times or anyone praising Trump was when he bombed Syria. We now know that that was based on a lie. Whistleblowers in the OPCW said that it turned out that there wasn't a chemical attack, let alone Assad ordered it. That was a low point in Trump's presidency as far as I was concerned. So what I'm saying is I'll call Trump out or I'll call this administration out when I think they do wrong. But I also understand that we have to be able to respond to aggression. Because if we don't, it will continue to escalate over and over again as the rest of the world realizes we're just a paper tiger. So it becomes a complicated situation. And if you're an honest person who's not just a mindless drone that's just like, oh, my side's always right, then it becomes a very complicated situation because you're trying to find the truth. I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what happened in this embassy attack. I don't know exactly what's going on. Like, you could read, depending on the news source you could read, Iran's been escalating for years, ever since Trump was in there, even before that. Or you could read that basically the U.S. has been pushing Iran for years. Both of those things are probably true at the same time. To me, the lamentable thing, don't get me wrong, any loss of innocent life particularly is lamentable. If we end up in some crazy war where our soldiers will die or innocent people in any country will die, that's a tragedy, don't get me wrong. But to me, the story right now is, why is it up to people like us to make up our own mind because we don't have journalists and we don't have intel people that we can trust? So what I'm going to do is kind of give both sides. I'm going to give the side that defends Trump's actions, and I'm going to give the side that's critical of Trump actions. And I want you to know that I can respect people on both sides. However, I've also seen groups of people on both sides that I don't respect. And so it's going to be complicated. And I'm probably going to say stuff that each of you will disagree with, regardless if you thought that it was a good idea to take out Soleimani or if you think that it was a terrible idea. I'm going to say stuff that that both sides will like and dislike. So let's start with the case for taking out Soleimani. One, we know he was a bad dude. Now that on its own isn't enough for me because we deal with bad people all the time. And Milo, you know that you're right, it's been going on for decades. The United States constantly is allied with people like in Saudi Arabia. We work with people in China. We work with people in all sorts of countries. They're terrible people that have basically committed genocide, that have brutal human rights records, So that enough's not alone. But, for example, that was the defense the neocons gave in the Iraq war. Well, Saddam was a bad dude. Okay, but that's not reason alone. As we can see, we leave bad people live all over the world. Right, Modus, and I'll get to that, the hypocrisy. I definitely will, I promise. So that's the first reason that this might be legitimized. The second reason, and this is the best argument, and this is an argument I can't get an answer from all of the people that are incensed of Trump's actions. Surely there has to be a time when our embassies or our people or our troops are attacked, when there's a response that is justified, a militaristic response that is justified. There has to be. So many of the people that are criticizing Trump are acting like, oh, well, the U.S. was there and it was bad for us to even be there, and so this was somehow justified and we shouldn't have responded. Well, we saw how that looked in Benghazi. We saw what happened. And I saw this summed up best by actually world-renowned chess player Russian Kasparov, which I've been into chess lately, but I just happened to see this tweet. It had nothing to do with me looking into chess, but it was from Kasparov. And his take on it was basically this. This is the problem with appeasement. Hey, how's it going, Michelle? Thanks for being here. The problem with appeasement that we saw like through the Obama administration and other administrations is that it emboldens foes. And eventually, it will lead to a further escalation where loggerheads will have to meet. It's just inevitable. Look at it in your everyday life. If you leave a bully flick your ears every day, eventually it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And you'll have to do something in response. Whereas if you would have just dealt with it in the first place, it wouldn't have escalated. And so we've let things like this escalate over and over again. Our embassies being attacked, U.S. interests being attacked. This doesn't mean I have to agree with us being in these areas of the world. I don't think we should be in Iraq. I don't think we should be in Afghanistan. But if we're there, we have a duty to the people that we are putting in harm's way, soldiers that just volunteered, something that I didn't do. I wasn't in the health shape and didn't have the heart and courage to do it. I don't care what your reason for joining the military is. If you did, and we put you in harm's way, the very least you should expect from us is we as a country have your back. And so when we have people in our embassies being attacked, we have to do something. Or else the result is Benghazi. So it's not all I hear people saying on the other side is they're like, well, the U.S. shouldn't be in this quagmire. I agree. We probably shouldn't be in Iraq. Now, we maybe should have an embassy, but we shouldn't be in there militaristically. We shouldn't be in Afghanistan militaristically as far as I'm concerned. How's it going, Pasty? Thanks. But we're there. And when we're there and we get attacked, we have to respond. I'm sick and tired, and I'll get to this later when I'm talking about the hypocrites, that's about right for the Democrats. They always look at the world through this cultural Marxist sense where oppressors versus whites, oppressor, any other color's oppressed. Well, it's always the United States is the oppressor, every other country's oppressed. The truth of the matter is almost every single country in the world has engaged in both noble and ignoble actions. Or they've been the oppressor and the oppressed. Yes, the countries that are stronger, have more economic and militaristic wealth, have an ability to do more as the oppressor, but that doesn't make them more immoral. And this idea where somehow there's this glee that occurs from many of these people that are Democrats that engage in this cultural Marxism, they want to see the U.S. attacked. They want to see U.S. embassies attacked. That's what's really going. They'll celebrate someone like Soleimani in Iran. Even though everything else they claim to be for women's rights, gay rights, the Iranian regime and Soleimani was far more of an aggressor than anything the United States has ever done. So that's the type of stuff. And there are reasonable people. Again, there are people on the left that I've seen that were against the Russiagate stuff. That said, we don't like Trump, but we think that the intel agencies are terrible and they're a coup against him. That are now like, oh, this is so terrible from Trump, and every single one of them. So, your Michael Tracey's, your Aaron Matte's, your Glenn Greenwald's. Granted, I don't have much of a following. I have 750 people that follow me on Twitter. But I'm responding to their tweets saying like, look, can we have a discussion? At what point is there allowed to be an attack, or a response back from the United States? The argument is, well, the U.S. is engaged in historical atrocities, therefore we deserve it. I'm not buying that. And I think that what we'll see, not only is that indefensible to the troops we put in harm's way, or the people we put in embassies right now, not only is it indefensible to just say, well, sorry, like Obama did, like Hillary did with the Benghazi people, not only is that indefensible to them, but that will set a precedent that makes these type of actions and attacks on our interests far more common in the future. So there should have been a response. Now, was this response the correct one? I don't know. It's very difficult, as I'll get to on the con side of it. I'm not sure. I don't know what to believe. I'll be totally honest with you. One of Trump's worst things that he's done is, despite bragging that he surrounds himself with the best people, it's been almost the opposite. Hence the constant leaks, the people that leave his administration that he kicks out that are then smearing him in the press. like the Scaramucci's, the Cohens. He put people that were warmongers like John Bolton, who was terrible in his administration. Mike Pompeo doesn't seem much better. So I don't know whether or not to trust them. I know that they say that there was intelligence that further U.S. interests were going to be attacked. What's up, SC? Well, right, SC, I get that. You are right. Not every liberal, and again, I'm not talking about the individual liberal that you see. I'm talking about the professional journalistic class. For example, the same Democrats and left-wing people that control the public narrative that have basically been cheering on the intel agencies, saying we have to trust them no matter what, that Trump's horrible for questioning the intel agencies, that said that we couldn't pull out of Syria or it would lead to genocide of the Kurds, that said that we shouldn't pull out of Afghanistan, that pushed us towards conflict with Assad and toward nuclear-armed superpower Russia, over and over and over, every day for 3.5 years. To hear them now say, oh my goodness, we're the party of peace, we can't believe Trump would lead to an escalation, is ridiculous. Now, there are individuals, possibly like you, that are not hypocritical, that are on the left. Those are the people I'm talking about, like Michael Tracey, Glenn Greenwald, and those type of people. But the first group that I'm talking about, the ones that cheered for the Russiagate and all that crap, they are cultural Marxists. They are people that seem to always cheer anytime the U.S. interest is gone against. So yeah, I'm with you totally 100%, SC, and that's what I'm trying to say in this video. I think there is a reasonable case to be made why we needed some sort of response. There's also a reasonable case to be made, was this the legitimate response? And spoiler alert, I don't know right now. Because my big take on this is I don't trust the media and I don't trust the intel people. So I don't know what to believe. I'm not in Iran. I'm not in Iraq. So I don't know what the actual intelligence is. We have Pompeo saying, oh, there was intelligence that the Iranians were going to attack more U.S. interests. That's why we needed to do this strike right then. I'm going to be consistent. Just like I say, I do not believe the intelligence community at this point, their assessment that Russia hacked the DNC servers, I don't believe it anymore. Until I see the evidence personally, I'm not going to believe them here. I'm not going to pick and choose when to believe the intel community when I think it suits me or my party or the person that I support. And I'll get to that, Etsy. I'll get to the idea that there are hypocrites on both sides. If your take is, if you're with me and you were tired of the Russiagate and you thought that the FBI and the CIA and the intel community has basically engaged in a coup against Trump and spread disinformation to bring him down, but you're willing to trust them here when it comes to defending Trump on this, that kind of makes you a hypocrite. Conversely, if you're someone who cheered for the intel communities in those situations and you bought their claims that, it was okay for them to spy on Trump using unverified opposition research that ended up all being lies and to break protocol 17 times and we can't question the intel agencies, I've been criticizing the Democrats and the left for that for 3 years now. If you've watched my videos, I've been saying over and over. I get told, when I was in college, even though I was conservative, kind of a Ron Paul conservative, I was against the Iraq war. I was for pulling out of Afghanistan. Most of my friends were left-wing people. They say I've changed. Oh, how could you vote for Trump? You've changed. Even though you're Republican, how could you vote for Trump? But I say they're the ones that have changed. They're the ones that all of a sudden are defending the very intel people that they criticized with me years ago. And yeah, I think there is a lot, MGC, that has to do with petrodollars and wanting this type of war. So so the case for it that I can see is our embassy was attacked, regardless of the fact of should we have been there, regardless of the fact of do interest in the United States want a war with Iran. Because I don't think we should really be in the area. And I do think that I'm skeptical of military-industrial complex, deep state-type people that have been encouraging wars like this. But our embassy was attacked. We have a duty to the people that serve in places like that to have some sort of response. The question is, was the response the correct one? Right? So now let's get to the other side, the case against. The number one case against is I'm tired of foreign wars and escalation. I'm tired of it. We're constantly told, oh, we have to basically be aggressive towards insert your country. Now, again, going more to the hypocrisy of this, remember, the same Democrats that were yelling at me, I did a debate with this YouTuber, Destiny. He incessant that one of the worst things Trump did was take a picture with Kim Jong-un. Can you believe he legitimized Kim Jong-un? And this was something that many Democrats did. Yet at the same time, they'll rush to the defense of Soleimani and Iran, a place that's just as bad. And so there's definitely hypocrisy. There's an agenda going on for many people that's just whatever it takes to smear Trump. And so now all of a sudden people that push this warmongering idea all across the world are all of a sudden against this instance. But nonetheless, I'm going to be consistent and say I don't want war with Iran. Look, I will be running for Congress in 2022. I don't know if I'll win, and I don't know if I'll ever be a voice that is very important on discussions like this or not, regardless. But if I was in charge, if I was the president, my policy would basically be, we will do everything possible to stop armed conflict with even our adversaries. We'll try negotiations, we'll try good faith discussions with even terrible leaders. That's what we'd try. However, if you push us to the point where armed conflict is necessary, it will be swift and brutal. It won't be 1,000 troops on the ground or something like that. It will be so much that the president said, you better sit down for good faith negotiations with us, or if you put us in the situation where you're killing people and you make armed conflict necessary, then it will be swift and brutal. In other words, walk softly but carry a big stick, right? Like Theodore Roosevelt. We honestly try not to engage in these conflicts, but if you push us to that point, then we'll go severely. So, but I don't know. So in that sense, that could be sort of justification if that's Trump's idea of what's going on here. But no doubt there is a constant move in the intel community, and I think with a lot of people Trump has surrounded himself, John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, they've never seen a war they don't want. So, and just so you know, I'm trying to follow the chat. I will try to respond, but if it's moving fast, it might be difficult. So I really do appreciate what you all have to say, and I think you're all as qualified as me to speak on this, so I really do want to hear what other people say. And yeah, the point you guys are making, there's so many. Why was he in Iraq? He certainly was doing nefarious things in Iraq. He was killing people. That's not his country. It's not like we bombed Soleimani in Iran. We did so in Iraq. But the counter to that is, did we have Iraq's permission? You know, if China executes a Russian on U.S. soil, U.S. government's probably going to be pretty PO'd. So, I mean, there's a lot of ins and outs. The second case against, or the second reason for the case against this attack is, I don't trust the intel agencies. I don't, at all. At all. I trust the intel agencies probably as little as I trust the mainstream media, which is unbelievable. Yeah, and Michelle, I think that you do have a case, right? I think that we know, again, let's go back to the beginning for those of you who weren't here. What do we know? We know that Iranian-backed forces attacked a U.S. embassy. We know that. We also know that this leader, Soleimani, was in Iraq. It's not a stretch to say that he was somehow personally involved with the setting up of the attack on the embassy. I don't know that to 100% be true. I don't know. But why was he there? But again, that doesn't mean that this was the best reaction. I don't know. I mean, I know that people that listen to me they'd like a definitive response from me. I'd like to think that this was acceptable, that this was okay. But we'll see what the escalation is. We'll see what happens. And we'll never know what the counter would be if we didn't respond in this way. We don't know what the reaction would have been, or what the escalation would have been. Because with any attack, and this is where I don't envy Trump or even Obama or Bush or anyone before him, even though I trust Trump more than I did those previous presidents. Anytime you're authorizing some sort of force that leads to the death of people, there's pros and cons of doing it or not doing it. There is a cost to not acting. And that's what I was saying, like Gary Kasparov was talking about. There's a cost for basically appeasement. And that cost is conflicts will escalate in other ways. The third argument against this attack is something that Tucker Carlson made. Now, let me just say for the record that I think it's so funny that the left attacks Tucker so much. The Democrats hate Tucker. Because if you actually listen to him, and by the way, he's my favorite person on Fox. I like him, Greg Gutfeld, I like Hannity sometimes. I like a lot of the guests, like the John Solomons, the Sarah Carters, people like that. But Tucker will call out Trump. He'll defend Trump when he feels necessary. He'll call out the Republicans when he feels necessary, etc. He says a lot of things that people on the left would seemingly agree with. Like, for example, he's against a lot of, like, corporate control. Places like Amazon. Corporations kind of surviving off of what he would consider, like, monopolizing things. Google, places like that. He was critical of this attack. Well, not necessarily critical, but he asked questions, much like I'm doing. And one of the points he made, which is a very good point, is, do we have more pressing problems? Yes, the embassy attack was something that deserves some sort of response. But so's the border crisis in Mexico. So's the fentanyl crisis that's coming in from China. Yet for some reason, we don't do anything about that. Elected leaders on both sides of the aisle. Yeah, see, and I do think that you're right. I mean, I didn't see your entire conversation with Modus there, but I do think you're entitled. Like, at least that's consistency. I respect someone who's consistent. It's like, I don't like these conflicts. Or I question them. That's fair. That's very fair. Even if we would disagree, at least that's a sort of consistency. I like to think that even the people on this channel that come on and listen to me that don't like Trump, I think most of those people are at least consistent. I hope that most of the people that like Trump are also consistent. And that not just mindless followers, but people that are able to call balls and strikes when they see with it. Yeah, Michelle, and I totally agree. It's a quagmire. That's why we shouldn't be in this situation in the first place. But we are there, which is why do we need some sort of response. So let me just, in a nutshell, go over everything that I've talked about real quick here. We know that Iran, the groups that attacked the embassy, is backed by Iran. We know that. We know that Soleimani was in Iraq. He wasn't in Iran when we attacked him. He was in Iraq. There had to be some sort of response. I don't know if this was the appropriate response, but there easily had to be a response. There are good reasons for it. We had to have a response. We can't have a policy of appeasement. We saw what happened in Benghazi. There are reasons to question it and say, I don't trust the intel agency when they say, oh, we had to do this or there were going to be more attacks. Because I think they're constant liars and they've lied the entire way through Trump's administration. And we definitely have other more serious problems, even of a similar situation, where we don't have military escalation. For example, one of the ridiculous statements I saw in favor of this was trying to connect, I can't remember who said this, but they were like, oh, well, did you know that the government of Iran basically gave safe haven to some of the 9/11 hijackers? Well, we know most of those hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. We just saw an attack on a military base in the United States that actually led to troops. I don't remember, were troops killed in that attack? But it was a Saudi national, right? So why the different... And it has to do with money and oil and the interest of the intel agencies and the military-industrial complex and the establishment. So there's a running theme with me is I just want to see standards applied evenly. If we're saying an attack on U.S. servicemen from a host country means it justifies attacks on the host country's leaders, why is it only selectively applied? Right, Michelle, and I agree with that. I think that there are other that we do often assume people think like us, and it is definitely not the case. And SC, I do respect the position you're coming from, which is we have to think about what are the costs of action or inaction, or the cost of any specific action we take. And so it's and I'm really happy with what I'm reading in the chat right now, and I think reasonable people could have concerns. They could support this action. They could have concerns with this action. And so that's where I stand on it. My big take, I'm sorry that I don't have an answer for everyone. Was this the exact right reaction? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think any of us would ever know. I think it's lamentable Trump surrounded himself with people I consider warmongers, but that doesn't mean that he was incorrect in this situation. I think Trump needs to trust his gut that he had in the second debate with Hillary, where he came out and said, why are we arming Islamic terrorist groups to help fight Assad? Shouldn't we be working with Assad to take out the terror groups? That's the president I want. That's the gut reaction I want. And let me just say this one last thing before I get to the next section. One of the reasons that he had to surround himself with these warmongers is it's the only people that were willing to take the job that were seemingly qualified. And a lot of this has to do with, unfortunately, I hate to point fingers, but it has to do with establishment Democrat type people. Because you poked and prodded over and over and over. Oh, Trump's trying to have good relations with Russia. Oh, Trump's trying to have good relations with Syria. Oh, Trump's trying to pull out of Syria. That would lead to the genocide of the Kurds. Oh, Trump wants to pull out of Afghanistan. That would lead to a vacuum. You pushed him further and further and further. You praised him when he bombed Syria the first time. And so that pushed him into a situation where he surrounded himself with people like John Bolton. And this is the predictable result. Now, I'm not saying this result was incorrect. And I hope Trump trusts his better judgments against people surrounding him in the intel agencies that no doubt will want to go to war with Iran. I hope that he tries to study himself. However, and another thing I'll say about Trump, which I think people misunderstand about him, which I think is actually strategic. I want other countries to be fearful that he might be a maniac. I don't want Trump to be a maniac, but I don't mind the leadership of Iran thinking he might be. So when he comes out and is like, look, Iran, if you respond, we're going to hit 52 targets immediately. And you have people like Ilhan Omar saying, this is a war crime. No, it's not. That's him using his bluster to possibly prevent conflict, which I totally agree with Trump doing that. As opposed to what? Obama? Which basically the rest of the world knew, you can push this guy around and nothing will ever happen. Unless you're Libya. So again, my big takeaway is, it's lamentable that it's so hard for reasonable people like us to decide whether or not this was a good action, a bad action. Because we don't have an intel agency that we trust, and we don't have a media that we trust. Never forget, according to the Democrats, according to the people that have defended the FBI and the other intel agencies, never forget, all the people that hate Trump that are for the impeachment, their argument is, the FBI, which is a big branch, I know that's different than the intel agencies like the CIA that deal internationally, but it's ran in a very similar way. They told you that they're so incompetent that they didn't know they weren't supposed to forge evidence to say the opposite of what it actually says. When the mainstream media, when the Democratic Party, when our intel agencies make that argument, look, our intel agents are so incompetent, they didn't know that if you get an email that says, yes, this person's a CIA asset, that they're not supposed to change it to say, oh, wait, no, they're not a CIA asset. It's just general old incompetence. When that's your argument, Democrats, the people running the Democrat Party, or the people running the intel agencies, or the people in the media, then how can you then expect us to believe the intel agencies when they say anything when it comes to foreign hacks, attacks on our elections, white-collar crime, terrorism, or in this case, intelligence on foreign countries? Right, and MGC, I totally agree with you. That's exactly why Gaddafi was taken out. Because he suggested that Africa unite under a currency called the African dinar. One of the first things the supposed rebels fighting Gaddafi demanded was that they go back to taking money from the Federal Reserve, loans backed by the Federal Reserve in the United States. I don't know many armed peasants that are upset and their first demand is, we demand that we continue to use petrodollars. Are you kidding me? Yeah, and I hope you're right, Michelle. I really do. The problem is, Michelle, now hear me out, even if that's what Trump wants, Trump's right to respond in some way. I totally get that. But what if Iran then decides, based on Trump, they perceive that Trump went too far? I'm not saying Trump did, but if Iran makes that claim, and then so they escalate, which leads to doing something so heinous that Trump has no choice but to declare war on Iran. I do give Trump the benefit of the doubt that I think that things are looking good for his chances politically. I think that he's achieving a lot of his agenda. I don't think he wants to escalate into the wars. But that doesn't mean he couldn't have made that this was the total best way to react. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm just saying I don't know. Right? So, that's my big takeaway. So, some other things that are worth talking about this. There is something... I'm going to say some things that make me sound like a hypocrite here. On one hand, a lot of the complaints I'll make about people being hypocrites on both sides of this comes from the fact that I think that there's a lot of people that are just partisan nonsense. They'll just cheer for their team no matter what. But then there's a lot of people that have an oversimplified view of the world. And I'll admit, as you'll see in this, that I'm guilty of that as well, that I'm hypocritical of that. And oftentimes when you take too much of an oversimplified view of the world, you end up not necessarily being as nuanced as you should. So for example, the cultural Marxists that I complain about all the time, they literally just look at you based on characteristics and determine whether or not you're right or wrong. You're white? Well, then you're wrong. You're an oppressor. You're not white? Oh, then you're right. You're Christian? You're wrong. You're an oppressor. You're some other religion? Well, then you're right. United States? Wrong. Some other country? Must be right. And it's a gross oversimplification. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing here. That there are people that are just so simplistic, they just assume any U.S. aggression whatsoever is wrong. These are the people that I'm saying are against the attack, but I think are arguing in good faith. They're not just total partisan hacks. They'll call out their side when they think that it's necessary. Or they're against, even when Obama was, you might be a Democrat, like it looks like SC was saying here. They were against Obama's actions in Libya. So if you were against that and you're also against Trump here, I give you far more credibility than someone who was, I was for Obama's attacks, but now all of a sudden I have a problem with Trump. And make no mistake about it, the people like SC that I think are being reasonable and arguing in good faith are far outnumbered by the people that are just like, again, I say this all the time. Before this situation, I said this. You remember Bush? Bush lied, people died, everybody in Hollywood, everyone in the music industry, all these people on the left, the Michael Moores of the world. I was going to concerts, I was into punk music, right? There was albums, Punk Against Bush, Rock Against Bush, Bruce Springsteen was out there. It was like the Vietnam War all over again, right? You had all these people in the entertainment industry, make love, not war, Bush is a warmonger, Cheney's a warmonger. And then comes Obama, who carries on the exact same policies, and all of a sudden they're quiet for 8 years. Well, now they're out of the woodwork again after pushing Trump towards armed conflict with Russia and Syria for 4 years. Going on 3 years, I guess, going on 4 years. Now they're back. The peaceniks are back. The Michael Moores are back. The Bruce Springsteens are back. The Kaepernicks are back. No problem when Obama was engaged in foreign escalation. Screw those people. I don't have any time of day for them. They're hypocrites. They're liars. They're partisans. They're totally okay with bloodthirsty wars if it's their guy doing it. So I don't care what their opinion is, really. But the people like the Glenn Greenwalds, the Michael Tracey's, other people like SC seem to be illustrating that as well here. The people that are like, look, I have serious questions when Obama did this. I have serious questions when Trump did it. That's a conversation I'm willing to have. That's a reasonable conversation. Yeah, I'm with you 100%, Lance. I'm not rushing to judgment to say whether or not this was a good or a bad thing. I'm just not. I think reasonable people could say on both sides. So, there is a discussion to be had. Now, yeah, I know, Jeff. Which, nice to see you, Jeff. Yeah, I mean, there are those, there are even those in the United States that are calling this an assassination, a terrorist attack by the United States. But of course that's what they're going to say. And they'll say that he was effective in fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but that's not the whole story. They also acted as terrorists themselves. And SC, I'm with you 100%. I'm tired of the money. That's exactly what Tucker was saying. We have so many problems at home, yet we're constantly projecting power in these ways across the world. So let me get into like where I'm also a hypocrite. It's nice to see you, Jeff. I do have a simplistic view of things, and I will admit it could sometimes be wrong. Because I just got done saying how people that have an oversimplistic view of things oftentimes aren't as nuanced as they should be. For example, I simplistically know I don't trust the intel agencies or the media. Now, I do know that that doesn't mean everything they say is always wrong. I just want to see proof before I believe them. That's it. For example, Russia may well have hacked the DNC server. They may well have. I'm not going to believe the intel agency anymore without seeing proof. I'm just not. But that doesn't mean they're wrong. Right? So, one of the things I don't understand and I'm trying to wrap my head around is, I've always said, like, if you turn on Fox News and you turn on MSNBC and they're both agreeing about something, that's usually something that should trouble you. Maybe not a non-news story like, ice cream is good or something like that. But if they're both like, oh yeah, this attack was a good thing, then it's probably skeptical. Like the Syria attack, which I was critical of Trump about at the time. And I think I bore out that I was right about it. That we bombed Assad before we had any proof that he launched a chemical attack. And that seems to have been the case. So, this situation's different though, isn't it? Iran's different. So let me go back and talk a little about what I mean. There is no doubt in my mind that Obama was a warmonger. Obama was the best thing that ever happened to the neocons because what they realized with Bush was, look, there's a lot of pushback against these foreign regime wars. People in the United States are getting sick and tired of their loved ones, particularly people from poor communities, enlisting in the military and getting killed overseas. They're sick and tired of it. And for reasons, Michelle, you were kind of saying earlier, right? Where it's like, that area of the world is such a mess. There's nothing we could do. I had a friend that served in Afghanistan who he would just tell me stories. He's like, they don't have roads. They have open air markets with just meat with flies and maggots all over it. Just like, what do you can't just go in there and expect like, we're going to come in, we're going to kill the bad guys and then everything's going to be fine. It's such a mess. It's going to take them years and years of themselves, the people of that country themselves, having uprising against the tyrants that are there. But if we come in, all it does is it allows the tyrants to paint the U.S. as the bad guys, the aggressors. And of course, why were we in Afghanistan? Because it benefited people. It benefited people in the establishment. Poppy fields and all of that. Energy, poppy, things like that. That's what was going on. We know it. We know that's what's going on. So the people are right. Like, they may have legitimately been upset with the Taliban, but we come in, the United States comes in and seen as a greater aggressor. But everyone's all for it. Obama, he comes in, and he just basically continues the policies of the neocons, but because he's Obama, because he's Democrat, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. Now all of a sudden everyone shuts up. The only people left criticizing were like Ron Paul type conservatives that were against the Iraq war under Bush and were against Obama's escalation. That's where I found myself. And so when people say, I've changed, no, I haven't changed. I stayed consistent the whole time. I was critical of these regime change wars. That doesn't mean I'm a hippie. That doesn't believe that we shouldn't respond with aggression. Right? Like, that's where I felt. But Iran was different. And I have theories as to why, but it's difficult. So you have this warmonger Obama who's totally pushing the neocon agenda. Yet for some reason in Iran, He's sending them billions of dollars. And I get it. I know if someone from the left, like I was talking about, like Michael Tracey or Glenn Greenwald, what they'd say is, that was money we owed them anyways. Sorry, no, not buying it. I mean, John Kerry, the Secretary of State, when we sent them those pallets of cash in the middle of the night, regardless if a court said we owed it or not, when we sent that, admitted that that money would find its way into terrorist hands, some of it. Hezbollah, Hamas, organizations that Obama himself had called terrorist organizations. So how can you justify giving billions of dollars? Like, this is always it's the same with the arming of the rebels in Syria. We knew that they were ISIS, al-Nusra, and Al-Qaeda, but we were arming them. So on one hand, we're told in our country, look, the Founding Fathers set forth a Bill of Rights. Go away, Siri. They outlined a Bill of Rights. One of those rights was our right to privacy, right? We have to totally give up those rights, we're told, because Islamic terror is such a big threat to us. Yet at the same time, we're arming Islamic terrorists in other countries. So why is it that I have to get felled up by some TSA screener that thinks they're Joe Biden sniffing my hair and feeling me up every time I go through an airport, all in the name of protecting us against the evil terrorists, but at the same time, my tax dollars are going to arm the same terrorists in other countries? It makes no sense. That's what happened in Libya. And it directly led to the Benghazi situation. We knowingly armed Islamic terrorists. Gaddafi was publicly telling us, these aren't my citizens. These are foreign Islamic terrorists that are coming into my country fighting. We armed those foreign Islamic terrorists. And then once we overthrew Gaddafi, what happened? Our embassy was attacked by the very people we armed. That's what happened. That's what went on under Obama. So what's going on in Iran? On one hand, we have like a faction of like these neocons that seem to want to escalate us to war with Iran. On the other hand, we have the Obamas that seem to want to prop them up. And it gets to a bigger discussion. And that's a discussion of Israel. My take on Israel has been this. It's very difficult. On one hand, I think historically, like, you had founding fathers, like I think it was Jefferson that said, trade with everyone, alliance with no one. And the problem with an alliance is this. Like, this is the problem with the NATO alliance. This is the easiest way to explain this. We're in a military alliance called NATO, right? One of our allied people in NATO is Turkey. So if Turkey is attacked, we are obligated under the alliance to fight back against their attackers, right? That's what being in an alliance means. Yet at the same time, we're told by the media, the Democrats, the intel agencies, etc., Turkey are these bloodthirsty maniacs, and if we pull out of Syria, they'll instantly butcher our allies, the Kurds. So we're actually storing nuclear weapons in Turkey, an allied country with us, while at the same time we're publicly saying they're bloodthirsty monsters that want to commit genocide. Does that make any sense whatsoever? That's the kind of insanity you get into when you're into alliances, though. The same is with Israel. I have no problem having Israel's back. I have no problem trading with them or having good relations with them. But oftentimes I think that Israel wants conflicts with countries, or at least, regardless, justified or not, and it ends up the U.S. goes in on their behalf, whether it be clandestinely, with sanctions, things like that. And so we've ended up now recently with, as the cultural Marxists on the left have gained power, Israel's considered an oppressor. And the truth is, Israel, just like all the other groups that are called cultural oppressors or that are called oppressors or oppressed, it turns out the truth about this cultural Marxism garbage is all of us, whether it be individuals based on your skin color, or whether you be an individual or groups such as a racial identity, a gender identity, a country, a religion, the truth is we are all simultaneously oppressors and oppressed. So Israel does some things that are bad, does some things that are not so bad, just like the United States. Now, there's varying degrees. Obviously, some actors, groups are oppressors more than they're oppressed. But that's the dirty little secret that no one... They, again, want to oversimplify the world. You're either a good guy or a bad guy. Well, most of us are some combination of both. Same's true of countries. So on one hand, you might be able to say, oh, Israel, they're using sanctions, or they're using monetary situations, or they're using armed conflict to take over the Golan Heights and things like that. On the other hand, Israel's getting rockets shot at them every day. Now you might say, but the technology is so inferior. What does it matter? If it was your family that had to live in fear because rockets, no matter how unsophisticated they are landing in your town, you'd want some sort of government action as a response to that. If Mexico or Canada were launching rockets into the United States, I guarantee the people that lived in the area those rockets were being hit would demand that the U.S. military do something in response. Yet when Israel acts back because they have a more sophisticated military, almost all of the UN and the Obama-type people, the cultural Marxists, they condemn Israel. The condemnations in the UN of countries, it's insane. It's like Israel's condemned far more than like every other country combined. Hey, what's up, Jojo? So, what... And now you see, and so it's like, I don't know the specifics. I know there's a lot, MGC, I know what you're talking about. Like, there's a lot that has to do with pipelines that are going through, alliances with Syria, Russia, geopolitical strategy, and things that go into that. But the difference is that I see with Iran, and the reason I bring up Israel is because, obviously, they're rivals with Iran. And so that situation, you get half of the warmongers that are all gung-ho for, let's support Israel, let's attack Iran. But then half the warmongers, and when I say warmongers, I mean like the Obama faction, are let's ally ourselves with Iran, and Israel's this dirty, evil place. So we can mess with Assad and Syria. Everyone agrees with that. It's okay. The neocons and the neolibs, we'll just call them for... Both warmongers, they're totally cool with overthrowing Libya. They're totally cool with trying to overthrow Syria. They're cool with aggression towards Russia. But half them want to support Iran and half them want to support Israel. And it becomes very confusing. Now, what I know, and this might be oversimplistic, and this is why I brought up, because I want to be totally honest with my own hypocrisy. I might not know the specifics of every situation, but I know when someone I don't trust is foaming at the mouth for some sort of war or foaming at the mouth to defend bad people, that it should raise an eyebrow. So when I saw the same Obama that overthrew Libya, that was supplying terrorists to overthrow Libya, and tried to do the same in Syria, all of a sudden sending pallets of cash to Iran, it raised an eyebrow. When I see the same people that call everyone a Nazi, that say conservatives can't speak on campuses, that say it's okay to punch a Nazi, that'll riot if someone like Ben Shapiro wants to speak on campus, when I see those same people say anyone connected to Israel is a terrorist and they can never speak on campus, but everyone in the Iranian regime and people like that, Hamas, Hezbollah, please come on campus and tell us how great you are, I'm skeptical. Now, is that an oversimplification that's wrong? Maybe. But that's the world we live in. And so when I turn on CNN, when I see Joe Biden or Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib talking about how, this was a mistake, and all the noble Iranian people, and this Iranian leader. When I see puff pieces, just like the terrorist, the ISIS leader that we killed, they called him an austere scholar. When I see puff pieces about Soleimani, who no one should disagree was a terrible person. Again, we can have questions of whether or not his execution was the wisest thing to do, but we should all be in agreement this wasn't a good guy. But when you see basically puff pieces being made about this guy by people in the United States, it's ridiculous. That's what makes this situation, like, I'm not a genius. I'm very opinionated. I was against the Syria attack. You go back and you watch my videos, and when Trump bombed Syria, I was very much against it right out of the gate. Why? Was it that I knew I was more researched in Syria than I am in Iran? No. It's because all of the people that I know are warmongers were totally for it. And the situation didn't make sense. Why would Assad gas his own people when he finally had won the war? It made no sense. That's why I said, wait, this doesn't make sense. All the usual warmongers are for it. And it doesn't make sense that Assad would do this. So, I let my gut tell me that was wrong. My gut tells me here, I don't know. I know our embassy was attacked. I know that warranted some response. I know the guy that was killed wasn't in Iran. He was in Iraq. I know he was a bad guy responsible for a lot of deaths of innocent people. But, on the other hand, I know that intel people around Trump are warmongers, and a lot of them are pushing with war with Iran. And I know there are a lot of bad people just like Soleimani that we deal with and are allied with. So it's a difficult situation. That's why I could respect people on both sides of the aisle. I could respect people that say, look, I have questions of whether or not this was kind of a lunatic move that would lead to an escalation. And I could respect people that said, no, our embassy was attacked. This was the correct thing to do. I guess we'll see how it plays out. I know that this was better. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for being here. I know this is better than Obama's reaction in Benghazi. I know that. No, Jesse, we don't know why Soleimani was near Baghdad. I mean, a friend, Milo, who I don't know if he's still on here, he sent me a thing claiming that Iraq claimed that they were trying to mediate between the U.S. and Soleimani, or Soleimani, however you pronounce it, to de-escalate the situation. And so they're upset that Trump bombed him. But my best guess would be it doesn't take a genius to put two and two together. Iranian-backed militants attack our embassy. The dude in charge of Iran's military happens to be right around there. Yeah, and I'm with you there too, Jojo. That's what I'm talking about. We should all agree that this was a bad guy, but there's all these celebrities and people like that, your Kaepernicks, your Omars, your Talibs, other celebrities that are out there, like, they pretend that this was a good guy, even though, like, most of them are also intersectionalists, so they believe in, like, women's rights and gay rights and all that, but they'll cheer someone who was in charge of a regime that executed gay people, or that beats women, or executes women if they're adulterers, and makes women cover their body and not go out. It's just, it shows, because to them, their narrative is so overly simplistic that if you're against the U.S., you must be a good person. Yeah, and I've heard both people, as far as Iraqis or Iranians celebrating or denouncing this, I don't know. I'm sure there are people on both sides of that ledger, but yeah, Mohammed, and you're absolutely right about that. Like, these claims of World War III are grossly overblown. Where were all these Dems when Obama was bombing people left and right? Where were all the Dems when the intel agencies and they themselves were pushing us towards conflict with Assad? Don't you think that going after Assad would have upset Russia, possibly China, which would lead to a direct conflict with armed nuclear superpowers, more so than even the Iranian situation? That's what I'm saying. I don't take them seriously. They are absolute ridiculous hypocrites. Absolutely. Let's see what else I wrote. But yeah, this idea that we're fawning over, people are fawning over Iran is absurd. So here's how both sides can be hypocrites. I've talked about how I could respect both sides. Here's how both sides can be hypocrites. And I mentioned this, but I want to talk about it in detail. If you are a Trump supporter and you have been furious, as I have, about the intel agencies, you had Chuck Schumer reach your Maddow before Trump was even sworn in. Trump has to be careful about criticizing the intel agencies. They'll find 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at him. And we've seen that's exactly what happened over and over again. All the leaders of the intel community are now on mainstream media talking about Trump, saying he's committed treason. They were spying on Trump's team. They broke protocol over and over again. They talked about insurance policies. They leaked classified information to the press to smear Trump over and over and over and over again. The IG report just showed 17 times they broke protocol just to spy on Trump and his team. inexcusable abuses. If you're someone who believes and is so distrusting of the intel community there, but you're going to totally believe when the intel community says, oh, Iran was going to attack U.S. interests even more, and so we had to do this immediately, you might want to rethink your position. You shouldn't just trust a group when they're saying things you like, when they're saying things that you think benefits your team. You should be consistent and say, if I have problems trusting them when they're going against Trump, I have problems trusting them when they're saying things that support Trump's actions. That's the position I find myself in. I don't trust them. So all I know is the bare minimum fact. Our embassy was attacked. We know that an Iranian-backed, at least even sites, and here's how I say we know. Even sites that I've read that are critical of Trump and dislike him and are critical of his actions. Al Jazeera, I saw say this, said that the PMF, an Iranian-backed militia group, was largely responsible for the attack on the embassy. We know that the guy that Trump executed, Soleimani, that he bombed, was in Iraq. Not in Iran, was in Iraq. So those are things I think we could say pretty certainly happened. As far as the rest of it, I don't trust the intel community. I don't. Now, I think that based on what I know, basically for certain, I'm 95% sure of, we should have responded in some way. Was executing this leader the right way? I don't know. But there definitely should have been an armed response to an attack on our embassy. Now, the other side is just as hypocritical. More so, in my opinion. If you're okay with Obama's Syria and Libya war, if you're okay with the constant intel agencies and Democrat narrative of pushing us to conflict with Assad and pushing us to conflict with Russia, if you're okay with them going incessant that Trump took a picture with Kim Jong-un and Trump tried to work with North Korea to stop a conflict from occurring there. Remember, that also happened. Then you're a hypocrite. Now all of a sudden you have a problem with this conflict. Yeah, I mean, the claim that this was Trump's Benghazi. Why? But it is stupid. It's an acknowledgement that Benghazi was a mess. And Trump did the right thing. I mean, the immediate response of you defend your embassy at that time, period, no matter what. That is absolutely the correct thing to do. Thank God no lives were lost because Trump responded correctly. And then you retaliate. You should. Again, the question is, how do we retaliate? And I respect that there's been people on this chat that are like, I have questions of if our retaliation was too much. It will lead to too much in an escalation. And yeah, the one of tubes, you're right. This is about oil. But again, maybe you could tell me. Anyone on the chat tell me. Why does it seem that the neocon, neo-lib warmongers, rather from the Bushes to the Obamas, they're in unison when it came to Libya, they're in unison when it comes to Afghanistan, they're in unison when it comes to Yemen, in unison when it comes to Syria, but in Iran it's different. Half of them basically want to back Iran, send them all this money like Obama did, and appease them no matter what, and half of them seem to want an escalation with Iran, which I could predict would be over oil. That's what's confusing about the situation. Let me read something here. Yeah, and you're exactly right, Mohammed. That's what... I didn't have a problem, in fact, with Obama trying to reach out to Iran and have good relations with them. I think we should do that. Now, sending them billions of dollars, and it's not just that they sent them billions of dollars. That's bad enough. But when your Secretary of State is on the record admitting, yeah, a lot of that money will get to terrorists that are fighting our troops, that's insanity. Trump did, when I did that debate with that YouTuber Destiny, he's like, oh, that's Trump's foreign policy blunders, like taking a picture with Kim Jong-un. That gave Kim Jong-un credibility. What are you talking about? It's a picture. I don't mind those kind of That cost us nothing. Billions of dollars going to armed terrorists that will be fighting us, that is something. But I don't have a problem with the general idea of working with, or, communicating with our adversaries to try to make relations better. It's all about what do we give up? It's a quid pro quo, right? Ironically. What are the negotiations? What are the conversations like? Giving the billions of dollars? Bad idea. Taking a picture with the guy? Don't care. Now, I don't know how much that worked, but at least it was an attempt. And the point that you're making here, Mohammed, that I'm also making is, it's ridiculous that attempt at peace, that attempt at de-escalation was considered weakness and capitulation to a warmonger. So Trump's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. I saw Senator Murphy, I believe it was Murphy, a Democrat. He tweeted out right after the embassy attack, basically, I wish I had the tweets in front of me, but before Trump responded, he pointed out basically Trump's feckless and he's seen as such an incapable leader that, he doesn't do anything that the rest of the world feels like they could attack our embassies. Then when Trump responds, he's like, this is too much. No matter what Trump did, these people would say, oh, it's terrible. He could have done the exact opposite. Trump could have did exactly what occurred in Benghazi, and the Democrats would have went nuts. Oh, Trump, they crossed the red line and Trump didn't do anything. And if he attacks back, they'll say, oh, that madman Trump, he attacked them. That's how hypocritical they are. Yeah, I saw that notice. It was a pretty ridiculous stakeout. And I mean, what are the possible escalations of this? What could possibly happen? Well, let's look at the worst possible. Maybe Iran decides to overtly, most likely what they'll do is sort of terrorist attacks. Low-level guerrilla-style terrorist attacks. Where they'll probably try to get terrorists on our soil and maybe attack us. But let's say they do so to the point where it leaves us no choice but to have a full-scale war with Iran. Now, all of the Dem fearmongers that are shouting, this is World War III. Again, they didn't say crap when Obama and the Dems were doing all the stuff pushing us to war in all those other ways. And again, even the people that I think are arguing in good faith, I haven't given me an explanation of what should we have done. They just say we shouldn't have been there in the first place. Okay, but we were. So now, I do want to talk about that. There is, again, I'm not talking about these scumbag Democrats that you saw that pushed us to always have to believe the intel agencies and they pushed us to war with Russia and Assad. I'm not talking about them. Or the entertainment people. Not them. But the people in good faith. Michael Tracey. I'm trying desperately to get one of these people on the show. Aaron Matei, Glenn Greenwald, Michael Tracey, Jimmy Dore. Left-wing people that were against the Russiagate crap. They don't like Trump, but they were against it. They were against Obama bombing people, and they're against Trump doing this. I can't get them to answer what point, because it seems to me the argument is as follows. Because of historical atrocities of the United States, we basically get what we deserve. Not that they're cheering for the embassy to be attacked, but if it's attacked, then we have no right to respond. And that's nonsense. My feeling is they would never say the same about another country. So, for example, if Iran itself, if Iran had an embassy in Germany and Israel decided to attack, an Israeli-led militia group attacked Iran's embassy in Germany, I doubt that the Michael Tracey's and the Glenn Greenwalds of the world would be like, well, hey, Iran and Israel are, have been at conflict, so Iran's not justified to do anything in response. I doubt that's what they would say. Now, maybe their argument would be, look, a response was justified by the United States, but not one this harsh. But then, now we're talking about degrees of threshold. So what response would have been justified? Oh, I like Jimmy Dore. He's funny. He's absolutely 100% right when it comes to not trusting the intel community and the Russiagate stuff. Now, he's an SJW cultural Marxist type person. He's wrong and all that stuff, but so is Glenn Greenwald and Aaron Matei. I think that you should reach across the aisle. To me, the biggest issue in the country right now is the corruption of our intel agencies, the corruption of the establishment of the deep state. So I'm willing to reach across the aisle for people I disagree with on all their kind of garbage social justice-y warrior economic policies, socialist policies. Was it Jimmy that spit in Alex Jones' face? Wow. I didn't realize. I remember something like that happening. I remember, him approaching the Young Turks. Well, that sucks, but regardless, I'm not really going to talk about that. So, I just don't know what people said what these groups' reaction should be. And the last thing I'll talk about just briefly here is, you could see people crawling out of the woodwork like Tlaib, Omar, Kaepernick. You could get a feeling these are people that matter as far as they have a powerful voice in the public narrative, regardless if they deserve it or not. They don't, but they have that voice. Yeah, you're right, Mohammed. That's exactly what would happen. Again, I go back to what I said at the beginning. Gary Kasparov, former chess champion, Russian. I don't think he's a big Trump fan, but he says, look, this is what happens. For example, you know what? Screw Kaepernick, and let me just say this real quick. Screw those people. There are people, blue checkmark people in Hollywood, people in the entertainment industry, and even Democratic politicians, that their contempt for the United States is transparent. Their love for the Iranian regime is transparent. That's all I'll say about it. But this idea of appeasement, let's look at North Korea. Why is the situation with North Korea where it's at now? It's because for 20 plus years, no one's done anything. They talked a big game, and North Korea pushes and pushes and pushes and pushes and pushes, and no one does anything. And so eventually, what happens is, there's probably going to have to be a serious conflict. Because there wasn't a slap on the hand given when it should have been. It's the same with these situations like in Iran. Now, Again, I don't think we should have a militaristic presence in Iraq. I don't think we should have one in Syria or Afghanistan. I don't. But we're there. And so these people that are like, I'm sick and tired of this narrative. And you hear it everywhere with these cultural Marxists. The United States they're the great evil. Yes, the country's done bad things. But 90% of the people, 95% of the people that are talking about the bad things the U.S. has done had no problem when Obama was perpetuating them, and they had no problem supporting the intel agencies when they were going after Trump. And they said things like, this isn't just fringe people. Remember Bernie Sanders? Bernie's big claim to fame, how's he going to pay for everything? We need to get out of these disastrous foreign wars. Stop spending so much money on the military. We could be paying for healthcare back home, right? Okay, well, Bernie has a chance to put his money where his mouth is. Trump wants to pull out of Syria. Maybe not in the best way. Maybe Bernie didn't prefer the particulars. Bernie comes out and says, this was the most disastrous foreign policy decision I've ever seen. Our allies, the Kurds, will be destroyed. You can make that argument about every military presence we have in the world. That's an argument for perpetual war. An argument for perpetually being in every country around the world. Because if we pull out, our allies could be endangered. So there's good old Bernie. On one hand, we have to stay in Syria. Totally for the intel community in their war against Trump. Was totally for it. Totally for pushing us towards aggression towards Assad and Russia. Totally for leaving our troops in Afghanistan. But now all of a sudden, when it comes to Iran attacking someone who attacked our embassy, that's beyond the pale. I'm sick and tired of these people that constantly talk about how horrible America is, having nothing to say when it's their party doing it. Nothing. Now, the few left, the 5% that are left, the good, honest people, that do criticize Obama and people like that. Yeah, and I'll talk about Tulsi in a second. Those people, in fact, I'll talk about Tulsi now. Tulsi's the flag bearer for that. I liked Tulsi 2 years ago. I liked Tulsi when she got into the race. I can't stand it. She's one of my least favorite now. Now I got to listen to all these people that, again, so then there's the 5% of people I'm talking about that did criticize Obama's wars. They're like, oh, Tulsi's been consistent on this. Tulsi's against this action and blah, blah, blah. Tulsi didn't say squat. Didn't say squat for 3.5 years when the intel agencies were going after Trump. Didn't say a damn word. She could have came out and said, I don't like Trump. I think he's a terrible president. I think he does bad domestically. Here's all the things I would have did different. But Trump was right to want to de-escalate from these wars. And I'm sick and tired of the war class and the intel agencies and the Democrats bagging on him for it. That's the one thing he did that was right. That could have been what Tulsi said, but she didn't. She was either silent or she... Remember, just because she voted present on the impeachment, she came out and was for the impeachment investigation. But now all of a sudden, oh, she's a big person of peace. Garbage. She's the big, this will help me politically, so I'll talk about it now. That's what's going on. Now, for those 5% of people that did criticize U.S. foreign intervention under Obama and under Democratic leadership, even they never talk about the rest of the world. And I know because I dealt with this in academia all the time. The idea of the U.S. empire and how evil the U.S. is and blah, 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 blah. Reparations, that type of crowd. Historical injustices committed by the United States. Did you ever notice it's only the United States they look at, or Western countries? If Iran's justified in attacking our embassy because of things like the Iraq War or other things, and we hear this stuff like the refugee, we have to take the refugees because historical oppression of people in the West, blah, 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 blah. Well, Iran used to be Persia. They went around conquering brown people all over the world. So does that mean this action's justified against them now? No, it's always just when the U.S. is taking action or the West is taking action and defending itself. That you can't, we can't have borders in this country. Borders? We stole the land. Well, guess what? The people we stole the land from, they also stole the land. That's the history of humanity. Armed conflict. Those who won the conflict took over the other people's land and property. It's not great. It's not a good thing. There were all sorts of atrocities done. But mostly the cultures we have left at some point defeated other cultures. Now, as we're becoming more sophisticated, hopefully we're trying to avoid that. But that's the history of humans. And I'm sick and tired of it. It's just the United States it's bad. Just the United States. Like, we can forget what Iran did. We can forget what China did. Forget what Russia did. It's just the United States. It's complicated. Yeah, and the government is rotten. I'm doing my best. I don't believe in violence to solve it. I try to do these videos. I try to run for Congress and things like that. I don't know how successful it'll be, but that's what I'm trying to do. Hey, Only in North, thanks for joining. Yeah, right, Modus, the idea of the noble savage, which is incredibly offensive. Because what you do is, they're actually, when you say, oh, this group's always the victim, Iran's the victims, they're noble, great people. One, it's a lie. And the people that, like, for example, Soleimani killed, or the people the Iranian government killed and were abusive to, they get washed away. We can't look at them as victims. And even the people that are in the country of Iran, you take away all their personal agency. When you say someone's basically can do no wrong, you're making them an infant. That's what we did to the Native Americans in the United States. We act like everything was hunky-dory, it was this peaceful, great place, and then the West came in, Europe came in, and that ruined everything. It's not that simple. That doesn't mean that Europe didn't do really bad things as well. They did. Everyone was doing bad things. But do you really think that there weren't Native American tribes going at war with each other and taking land from each other? Do you think that when we landed here, they were all peaceful? No! But that's the narrative that's fed to us now. So it's this idea that, I don't, and I agree, I'm for criticizing the United States when they should be criticized. I don't think we should have a militaristic presence in Iraq. I do think that we should be working with Iran and other places to try to have good relations. I think that oftentimes we've let Israel, who I support in a lot of ways too, it's complicated. I think we should have moved the embassy to Jerusalem. I fought vehemently, argued with people about that. Oh, moving the embassy to Jerusalem will cause all kinds of violence. Well, the side that starts using violence because an embassy was moved, they're the ones to blame. That wasn't Israel. That was Palestine. So I supported Israel in those situations, but I do think historically we've allowed ourselves, in an effort of being in an alliance with Israel, to put ourselves in positions where our priorities aren't correct. Instead of looking, what can we do back home to fix the problems we have here, we're spending billions of dollars for conflicts in the Middle East that we have no business in. Our people that serve in the military dying over it. Using our tax money. But we're there. So what? Honestly, what is their reaction? What would the reaction be for the people that are furious? I mean, it seems to me like, I know it was, I don't know who it was, Modus, one of you said, put him in a timeout chair. That's not far from the truth. It seems to me like these people that I respect and I'm willing to listen to, again, please keep in mind, I'm differentiating. The Democrats, the Joe Bidens of the world, all of the Democrats, the media, this is 95% of the people that are calling Trump out right now. Everyone in the entertainment industry, almost everyone. Don't want to be too hyperbolic. But 95% of these people are hypocrites. They had no problem with what Obama did. They had no problem telling us we needed to trust the intel agencies when they were having a coup against Trump. They had no problem saying it was a mistake for Trump to try to de-escalate in Syria. They had no problem saying that it was a mistake for Trump to want to pull out of Afghanistan. No problem with wanting to encourage more hostilities towards Assad and towards Russia. No problem with any of that. Now coming out and saying, oh, we have a problem with this. Those people are hypocrite partisans that just want to attack Trump for anything, period. So I'm not talking about them. But the people arguing in good faith that are saying, I had a problem with Obama, I had a problem with the intel community, with all that stuff. What did they want to have happen? They won't answer me. The best answer I've got, I'd be like, what should we have done? Okay, the embassy was attacked. What should we have done? This is the response I've got from this group. Oh, well, the United States historically has killed millions of people. What should they do? Okay, that's not an answer. Oh, the United States shouldn't have been there in the first place. Okay, fine, but that's not an answer. We were there. I mean, this argument's so stupid to me. It's like, I think adultery is a really bad thing. I think it's heinous. I really do. I take marriage very seriously. But if someone cheats on their wife and has a kid, do you then say, oh, they shouldn't pay child support. They should have never had that kid in the first place. They should just leave that kid alone. Never deal with that kid. Look, yes, something bad happened, but you have to deal with the consequence. We're there. Trump didn't put us on Iraq, but we're there, and he's president, and it was attacked. What should he do? Run away? We should just pull out? That's the message you want to send to the rest of the world? You attack our place, we'll cower and leave. You don't think that that's exactly what I was talking about when I said about Kasparov saying this is the consequence of appeasement? Something had to be done. Was this the best course of action? I don't know. But those that are telling you this is because Trump's bloodthirsty and wanted escalation, I don't think that's the case. That doesn't mean this is necessarily... Hey, thanks, Jesse. Take it easy. That doesn't mean necessarily that Trump's correct in what he did. But impugning his motives is somehow he's bloodthirsty or something like that. I think his actions in the first presidency have shown to the counter. He's been far more restrained than Obama was. Well, he's had a lot of drone strikes. Well, you're right, MJC. They all agree that's the only thing with the Iran situation. It's like they played up, in part of their effort to control us, they played up this cultural Marxism so much that when it comes to Iran, they've created the monster that's like, oh, we have to support Iran. And they're like, whoa. Not necessarily. It doesn't mean both sides of those equations are right. Or without fault, but... So, I don't know. Yeah, take it easy, Jesse. I just don't understand what that group wants. So, I guess my final takeaway is this. Reasonable people could be both think that it was a good move on Trump in this or think that it was a questionable move. Reasonable people could be worried about the consequences of it. If you're one of those people, I also ask you to remember there were consequences to inaction as well. I don't see most of the people complaining are hypocrites. They had no problem with foreign escalation in other ways. They've cheered for it for 4 years, so don't take them seriously. They're liars. They're warmongers. It's just one of the things that matters to them is maintaining power. And so if they could smear Trump, they will. They're using this to smear, but they would cheer for war in any other way. There are legitimate people that have a problem with this, which I don't mind talking to, but I haven't got a good answer of what the appropriate response would be. There are hypocrites on both sides of the aisle. So my takeaway is I think there should have been a response. I don't know if this was the best response. I'm hopeful that it'll work out. I wish I had a better answer for people. And the last thing I'll say is one of the reasons, what this situation illustrates to me is the biggest problem in this country is we do not have an intel agency or even journalists that are credible. We don't. And so it's left up to people like me and you. We could be lied to. We're left on relying on gut feelings, which is terrible. And so remember, not the Colin Kaepernicks of the world, not the Joe Bidens of the world, or the Bernie Sanders of the world. But when you're talking to your friends, regardless if they like or hate Trump, and they have a different opinion on you on this Iran situation, remember, we're all ignorant to some extent because we can't trust any of the information we're getting. And you could be a reasonable person and be on both sides of that equation. But anyone who's celebrating Soleimani like he was some sort of hero or celebrating the Iranian government like it's this great place are full of it. And we all know that. So, and the last thing I'll say is, lest I be called because again, I'm saying there should have been a response. I don't know if this was the right response by Trump. That's what I'm saying. But I know people will criticize me and say, oh, you're not good. You call out all the foreign regime change wars, but not when it's your boy Trump. I know that's what the criticism is going to be of me. This could have been the wrong decision. It could have been. And I'm not just being wishy-washy because I'm afraid to go on record with stuff like this. And the proof of it is, go back and watch my Syria videos. I had Trump supporter after Trump supporter telling me how wrong I was. I was a Hillary supporter in disguise. I bailed on the president as soon as things got tough. That's because I knew and my intuition told me right out of the gate, this is wrong. I don't trust the intel agencies. I don't trust these warmongers. And Trump was wrong to listen to them. I don't get that here. I still don't trust the warmongers, but it's cloudier. So I just don't know. I literally don't know. If more information comes to light, which could be proven to me, that shows this was a really bad move by Trump, then I'll say that. But I just don't know right now. No, I'm with you, MJC. But what's the revolt look like? I don't think we need a violent revolution. In fact, violence does the exact opposite. They're setting the conditions up to push us into violence. That's what they're doing. Then they know that they control the narrative. As long as they control the narrative, violence is the last thing to do, which I'm against political violence anyways. Look at who was it? There was a rabbi that was just quoted after this latest attack. He said, we saw through the Proud Boys exactly what the situation is. The left attack, like Antifa, or in the Jewish community, you have all these anti-Semitic people on the left. The Farrakhan type people. Attack. And then what happened? You had a group sprung up that, look, did bad things as well, don't get me wrong. But in the Proud Boys, they were out there looking for violence, but it was as a response to their groups, their ideas, their side being attacked over and over. So when they decided to fight back, oh, they're horrible, they're terrible. That's what they want. They put you in the position where they want you to say, I have no choice. Look what they did, right? The militia groups that decided we're going to go to the border and stop illegal immigration. Oh, they'll arrest those people, not the illegal immigrants. So they want to put you in position to take the law in your own hands. So what we need to do instead is, you need to inform and convince enough people of the truth, of just how corrupt the media, the establishment, the deep state is. Then you could begin change and violence won't be necessary. So what we need to do is take back the narrative. And we could all do that in different ways. You could do it by having a channel like me. You could just do it by talking to your friends. You could do it in a funny way, in a calm way, in a more impassioned way, in a loud way. You could debate people. You run for Congress. You know? The system can't be trusted right now because they control the narrative. If they didn't control the narrative, if enough people woke up and saw how terrible it was, then all of a sudden those systems like the justice system would end up working better. It's not perfect. But what's the counter? Like a French Revolution? That's not what anyone wants. Robespierre? Blood in the streets? The more you proclaim violence or the need for violence, all that does is them say, see the right, see what the right's doing. They're calling for violence. We need to crack down on the right. Yep, we need to take more of their rights. Yep, we need to censor them more on social media. Yep, we need to do that, which they will. And what you don't understand is the right, even though you're right in how corrupt the government is and how corrupt the media and all this stuff is, the average person doesn't get it. Or they get it, but they don't care because they don't realize the severity of it. And so when you cheer for that violence, all it does is make all these people, like, look at Black Lives Matter. It's a similar situation. I'm sure most people in this country could agree. There are some bad cops, and bad cops oftentimes get away with things, and they should be punished. But once they made it about, we're going to go out and we'll use violence, or we're going to do this racially, now every reasonable person's like, yeah, we don't want anything to do with you. You're nuts. The difference is, I think MJC, when you talk about the necessity for violence, you're increasing their power. Just like when the left talks about, you got to punch Nazis, and Antifa's not that bad. They're fighting fascism. Every time they talk about that, reasonable people start to be like, whoa, what? Wow, the left's losing their mind. So if the right decides, we're going to do the same thing, then those people in the middle will no longer be your allies. Oh, and of course it's been playing out forever, yeah. But yeah, it's a mess, and I talk about it all the time. We could disagree on how to deal with it, but you'll never hear me cheer for any sort of political violence. It's just not going to happen. I'm totally against it morally. I'm against it strategically. I think that strategically, the more you talk about stuff like that, the more it benefits the other side. Every single time. You have people that are sick and disgusted by the abortion laws, third trimester abortions and stuff like that. Absolutely disgusted by it. But as soon as you start talking about, so we should bomb these clinics, people are like, well, nope, I'm on the other side now. So, we'll see. That's fine, MGC, but it's immoral, and I think that it's the same argument you're making right now by why violence is justified is exactly what millions of people think about Donald Trump. He's a tyrant, he's evil, he's a dictator, he's going to lock up gay people, he's got children in cages. Violence is justified against him and his supporters. They totally, as much as you believe that we need some sort of violence that goes against this system, there are people that believe that exactly against Donald Trump and his supporters. Exactly the same thing. And you say, yeah, they're wrong and I'm right. That's what they say about you. That's why political violence isn't justified. So, but anyways, it's a good discussion. I'm not, by no means am I saying that I didn't want you to talk about that. That's fine. But yeah, so that's my take on this Iran situation. We'll see where it goes in the future. I think that we should pay attention to this. I'm willing to change my opinion on whether or not, at this point, I'm open to see where it leads. I'm reticent. I don't want a war. I'm reticent in that I don't trust the intel people. I'll be skeptical of what they say going forward. I don't trust the media. But we'll see what happens going forward. So thank you everyone for coming on a Sunday. I really appreciate it. I will be doing a live stream tomorrow night. Monday night at 11 p.m. My weekly late night live stream. And I do need to put out more videos, non-live stream videos. So I'll be trying to do that. But whatever you guys think, this is just something I'm throwing out there. I've heard some response to this. I'm considering doing one live stream a week where maybe I talk less about politics and just more about other stuff. I don't know if people would be interested in that or not. But it's just something out there. So if you want to support me, I didn't put up my Twitter handle or my Patreon and stuff today, but it's on some of my other videos, so you can check out like my last live stream in the description of the video if you want any of that information. But I do really appreciate all of you that support me. And I also want to say thank you to MJC, you, SC, and Michelle Modus. My brother Jojo was in here, Milo, everyone else that's been talking. I don't think you all agreed with everything what I said, and I think some of you disagreed with each other, but I think that's fantastic, and I really appreciate you sticking with me. And I do want to say this, I can't stress this enough. This is the one thing, if you listen to me, I hope that you get from me. I am being honest. I am never saying anything because I think it will benefit and grow my channel, or it will help me in my chances when I run for Congress eventually. I won't do that. When I ran for Congress, I knew there were certain positions I had that were not going to help me in the district I was running in, such as gay marriage. I have no problem with gay marriage. That hurt me where I was running. But what I told those people is what I'm telling you now. I hope that you can trust that I am me. I'm not saying something because I think you want to hear it. This is who I am. So I hope that that comes across. Even if you disagree with me, even if you think I'm a lout or uninformed. But I do really appreciate you, and thank you all for your comments. I learned just as much from you, and I like hearing everyone's opinions as much as I hope that you like hearing mine. So thank you everyone for the well wishes, and 11 o'clock tomorrow night, tune in. I'll be there. I think it should be a good one. So thanks everyone, and have a good one.